Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading the last chapter of Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, The Last Words, Chapter 17, starting on page 293.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondents, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, chapter The Last Words, page 293. Before going to Europe, some events came into my life which were great surprises to me. In fact, my whole life has largely been one of surprises. I believe that any man's life will be filled with constant, unexpected encouragements of this kind if he makes up his mind to do his level best each day of his life. That is, tries to make each day reach as nearly as possible the high watermark of pure, unselfish, useful living. I pity the man, black or white, who has never experienced the joy and satisfaction that come to one by reason of an effort to assist in making someone else more useful and more happy. 6 months before he died, and nearly a year after he had been stricken with paralysis, General Armstrong expressed a wish to visit Tuskegee again before he passed away. Notwithstanding the fact that he had lost the use of his limbs to such an extent that he was practically helpless, his wish was gratified and he was brought to Tuskegee. The owners of the Tuskegee Railroad, white men living in the town, offered to run a special train without cost out to the main station, Chehaw, 5 miles away, to meet him. He arrived on the school grounds about 9 o'clock in the evening. Someone had suggested that we give the general the pine knot torchlight reception. This plan was carried out, and the moment that his carriage entered the school grounds, he began passing between two lines of lighted and waving fat pine wood knots held over by 1,000 students and teachers. The whole thing was so novel and surprising that the general was completely overcome with happiness. He remained a guest in my home for nearly 2 months, and although almost wholly without the use of his voice or limbs, He spent nearly every hour in devising ways and means to help the South. Time and time again, he said to me during this visit that it was not only the duty of the country to assist in elevating the Negro of the South, but the poor white man as well. At the end of his visit, I resolved anew to devote myself more earnestly than ever to the cause which was so near his heart. I said, if a man in his condition was willing to think, work, and act, I should not be wanting in furthering in every possible way the wish of his heart. The death of General Armstrong a few weeks later gave me the privilege of getting acquainted with one of the finest, most unselfish, and most attractive men that I have ever come in contact with. I refer to the Reverend Dr. Hollis B. Frissell, now the principal of the Hampton Institute and General Armstrong's successor. Under the clear, strong, and almost perfect leadership of Dr. Frissell, Hampton has had a career of prosperity and usefulness that is all that the general could have wished for. It seems to be the constant effort of Dr. Frissell to hide his own great personality behind that of General Armstrong, to make himself of no reputation for the sake of the cause. More than once, I have been asked what was the greatest surprise that ever came to me. I have little hesitation in answering that question. It was the following letter, which came to me one Saturday morning when I was sitting on the veranda of my home at Tuskegee, surrounded by my wife and 3 children. Harvard University, Cambridge, May 28, 1896. President Booker T. Washington. Dear Sir, Harvard University desires to confer on you the approaching commencement an honorary degree, but it is our custom to confer degrees only on gentlemen who are present. Our commencement occurs this year on June 24th, and your presence would be desirable from about noon till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Would it be possible for you to be in Cambridge on that day? Believe me, with great regard, very truly yours, Charles W. Eliot. This was a recognition that had never in the slightest manner entered into my mind, and it was hard for me to realize that I was to be honored by a degree from the oldest and most renowned university in America. As I sat on my veranda with this letter in my hand, tears came to my eyes. My whole former life, my life as a slave on the plantation, my work in the coal mine, the times when I was without food and clothing, when I made my bed under a sidewalk, my struggles for an education, the trying days I had had at Tuskegee, days when I did not know where to turn for a dollar to continue the work there, the ostracism and sometimes oppression of my race. All this passed before me and nearly overcame me. I had never sought or cared for what the world calls fame. I have always looked upon fame as something to be used in accomplishing good. I have often said to my friends that if I can use whatever prominence may have come to me as an instrument with which to do good, I am content to have it. I care only for it as a means to be used for doing good, just as wealth may be used. The more I come into contact with wealthy people, the more I believe that they are growing in the direction of looking upon their money simply as an instrument which God placed in their hand for doing good with. I never go to the office of Mr. John D. Rockefeller, who more than once has been generous to Tuskegee, without being reminded of this. the close, careful, and minute investigation that he always makes in order to be sure that every dollar that he gives will do the most good. An investigation that is just as searching as if he were investing money in a business enterprise convinces me that the growth in this direction is most encouraging. At 9 o'clock on the morning of June 24th, I met President Eliot, the Board of Overseers of Harvard University, and the other guests at the designated place on the university grounds for the purpose of being escorted to Sanders Theater, where the commencement exercises were to be held and degrees conferred. Among others invited to be present for the purpose of receiving a degree at this time were General Nelson A. Miles, Dr. Bell, the inventor of the telephone, Bishop Vincent, and the Reverend Manu J. Savage. We were placed in line immediately behind the president and the board of overseers, and directly afterward, the governor of Massachusetts, escorted by the Lancers, arrived and took his place in the line of march by the side of President Eliot. In the line, there were also various officers and professors clad in cap and gown. In this order, we marched to Sanders Theater, where after the usual commencement exercises came the conferring of the honorary degrees. This, it seems, is always considered the most interesting feature at Harvard. It is not known until the individuals appear upon whom the honorary degrees are to be conferred, and those receiving these honors are cheered by the students and others in proportion to their popularity. During the conferring of the degrees, excitement and enthusiasm are at the highest pitch. When my name was called, I rose, and President Eliot, in a beautiful and strong English, conferred upon me the degree of Master of Arts. After these exercises were over, those who had received honorary degrees were invited to lunch with the president. After the lunch, we were formed in a line again and were escorted by the marshal of the day, who had that year happened to be Bishop William Lawrence, through the grounds where, at different points, those who had been honored were called by name and received the Harvard Yale. This march ended at the Memorial Hall, where the alumni dinner was served. To see over 1,000 strong men representing all that is best in state, church, business, and education, with the glow and enthusiasm of college loyalty and college pride, which has, I think, a peculiar Harvard flair, is a sight that does not easily fade from memory. Among the speakers after dinner were President Eliot, Governor Roger Wolcott, General Miles, Dr. Manoh J. Savage, and Honorable Henry Cabot Lodge, and myself. When I was called upon, I said, among other things, it would in some measure relieve my embarrassment if I could, even in a slight degree, feel myself worthy of the honor which you do me today. Why you have called me from the Black Belt of the South, from among my humble people, to share in the honors of this occasion is not for me to explain. And yet, it may not be inappropriate for me to suggest that it seems to me that one of the most vital questions that touch our American life is how to bring the strong, wealthy, and learned into hopeful, helpful touch with the poorest, most ignorant, and humblest, and at the same time make one appreciate the vitalizing, strengthening influence of the other. How shall we make the mansions on yon Beacon Street feel and see the need of the spirits of the lowliest cabin in Alabama cotton fields or Louisiana sugar bottoms? This problem Harvard University is solving not by bringing itself down, but by bringing the masses up. Continued. In my life, the past has meant anything in the lifting up of my people and the bringing about of better relations between your race and mine. I assure you from this day it will mean doubly more. In the economy of God, there is but one standard by which an individual can succeed. There is but one for a race. This country demands that every race shall measure itself by the American standard, but a race must rise or fall, fail or succeed, and in the last analysis, mere sentiments count for little. During the past half century and more, my race must continue passing through the severe American crucible. We are to be tested in our patience, our forbearance, our perseverance, our power to endure wrong, to withstand temptations, to economize, to acquire and use skill, in our ability to compete, to succeed in commerce, to disregard the superficial for the real, the appearance of the substance, to be great and yet small, learned and yet simple, high and yet servant of all. As this was the first time that a New England university had conferred an honorary degree upon a Negro, it was the occasion of much newspaper comment throughout the country. A correspondent of a New York paper said, when the name Booker T. Washington was called, he arose and to acknowledge and accept there was such an outburst of applause as greeted no other name except that of the popular soldier patriot General Miles. The applause was not studied and stiff, sympathetic and condoling. It was enthusiasm and admiration. Every part of the audience, from the pit to the gallery, joined in, and a glow covered the cheeks of those around me, providing sincere appreciation for the rising struggle of an ex-slave and the work he has accomplished for his race. A Boston paper said editorially, in conferring the honorary degree of Master of Arts upon the principal of the Tuskegee Institute, Harvard University has honored itself as well as the object of its distinction. The work which Professor Booker T. Washington has accomplished for the education, good citizenship, and popular enlightenment in his chosen field of labor in the South entitles him to the rank with our national benefactors. The university which can claim him on its list of sons, whether in regular course or in honoris causa, may be proud. It has been mentioned that Mr. Washington is the first of his race to receive an honorary degree from a New England university. This, in itself, is a distinction. But the degree was not conferred because Mr. Washington is a colored man or because he was born in slavery, but because he has shown, by his work for the elevation of the people of the Black Belt of the South, a genius and a broad humanity which count for greatness in any man, whether his skin be white or black. Another Boston paper said, It is Harvard which first among New England colleges confers an honorary degree upon a Black man. No one who has followed the history of Tuskegee and its work can fail to admire the courage, persistence, and splendid common sense of Booker T. Washington. May Harvard honor the ex-slave, the value of whose services alike to his race and country only the future can estimate. The correspondent of the New York Times wrote, all the speeches were enthusiastically received, but the colored man carried off the oratorial honors. and the applause which broke out when he had finished was vociferous and long continued. Soon after I began work at Tuskegee, I formed a resolution in the secret of my heart that I would try to build up a school that would be so much service to the country that the President of the United States would one day come to see it. This was, I confess, a rather bold resolution, and for a number of years I kept it hidden in my own thoughts, not daring to share it with anyone. In November of 1897, I made the first move in this direction, and that was in securing a visit from a member of the President McKinley's cabinet, the Honorable James Wilson, Secretary of Agriculture. He came to deliver an address at the formal opening of the Slater Armstrong Agricultural Building, our first large building, to be used for the purpose of giving training to our students in agriculture and kindred branches. In the fall of 1898, I heard that President McKinley was likely to visit Atlanta, Georgia for the purpose of taking part in the Peace Jubilee exercises to be held there to commemorate the successful close of the Spanish-American War. At this time, I had been hard at work together with our teachers for 18 years trying to build up a school that we thought would be of service to the nation, and I determined to make a direct effort to secure a visit from the president and his cabinet. I went to Washington, and I was not long in the city before I found my way to the White House. When I got there, I found the waiting rooms full of people, and my heart began to sink, for I feared there would not be much of a chance in my seeing the president that day, if at all. But at any rate, I got the opportunity to see Mr. J. Addison Porter, the secretary to the president, and explain to him my mission. Mr. Porter kindly sent my card directly to the president, and in a few minutes word came from Mr. McKinley that he would see me. How any man can see so many people of all kinds with all kinds of errands and do so much hard work and still keep himself calm, patient, and fresh for each visitor in the way that President McKinley does, I cannot understand. When I saw the president, he kindly thanked me for my work, which we were doing at Tuskegee for the interest of the country. Then I told him briefly the object of my visit. I impressed upon him the fact that a visit from the chief executive of the nation would not only encourage our students and teachers, but would help the entire race. He seemed interested, but did not make a promise to go to Tuskegee, for the reason that his plans about going to Atlanta were not made. But he asked me to call the matter to his attention a few weeks later. By the middle of the following month, the president had definitely decided to attend the Peace Jubilee at Atlanta. I went to Washington again and saw him, with a view of getting him to extend his trip to Tuskegee. On this second visit, Mr. Charles W. Hare, a prominent white citizen of Tuskegee, kindly volunteered to accompany me to reinforce my invitation with one from the white people of Tuskegee and the vicinity. Just previous to my going to Washington the second time, the country had been excited and the colored people greatly depressed because of several severe race riots which had occurred at different points in the South. As soon as I saw the president, I perceived that his heart was greatly burdened by the reason of these race disturbances. Although there were many people waiting to see him, he detained me for some time, discussing the condition and prospects of the race. He remarked several times that he was determined to show his interest and faith in the race, not merely in words, but by acts. When I told him that I thought that at that time scarcely anything would go farther in giving hope and encouragement to the race than the fact that the president of the nation would be willing to travel 140 miles out of his way to spend a day at a Negro institution. He seemed deeply impressed. While I was with the president, a white citizen of Atlanta, a Democrat, and an ex slaveholder came into the room, and the president asked his opinion as to the wisdom of his going to Tuskegee. Without hesitation, the Atlanta man replied that it was the proper thing for him to do. This opinion was reinforced by that friend of the race, Dr. J.L.M. Curry. The president promised that he would visit our school on the 16th of December. When it became known that the president was going to visit our school, the white citizens of the town of Tuskegee, a mile distant from the school, were as much pleased as were our students and teachers. The white people of the town, including both men and women, began arriving to decorate the town and form themselves into committees for the purpose of cooperating with the officers of our school in order that the distinguished visitor might have a fitting reception. I think I never realized before how much the white people of Tuskegee and vicinity thought of our institution. During the days when we were preparing for the president's reception, dozens of these people came to me and said that while they did not want to push themselves into prominence, if there was anything they could do to help or relieve me personally, I had but to intimate it, and they would be all too glad to assist. In fact, the thing that touched me most deeply, almost as deeply as the visit of the president itself, was the deep pride which all classes of citizens of Alabama seemed to take in our work. The morning of December 16th brought to the little city of Tuskegee such a crowd as it had never seen before. With the president came Mrs. McKinley and all of the cabinet members but one, and most of them brought their wives or some members of their families. Several prominent generals came, including General Shafter and General Joseph Wheeler, who were recently returned from the Spanish-American War. There was also a host of newspaper correspondents. The Alabama legislature was in session at Montgomery at this time. This body passed a resolution to adjourn for the purpose of visiting Tuskegee. Just before the arrival of the president's party, the legislature arrived, headed by the governor and other state officials. The citizens of Tuskegee had decorated the town from the station to the school in a generous manner. In order to economize in the matter of time, we arranged to have the whole school pass in review before the president. Each student carried a stalk of sugar cane with some open bowls of cotton fastened to the end of it. Following the students, the work of all departments of the school passed in review, displayed on floats drawn by horses, mules, and oxen. On these floats, we tried to exhibit not only the present work of the school, but to show the contrast between the old methods of doing things and the new. As an example, we showed the old method of dairying in contrast with the improved methods, the old methods of tilling soil in contrast with the new, the old methods of cooking and housekeeping in contrast with the new. These floats consumed an hour and a half of time in passing. In his address in our large new chapel, which the students had recently completed, the president said, among other things, "To meet you under such pleasant auspices and to have the opportunity of a personal observation of your work is indeed most gratifying. The Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute is ideal in its conception and has already a large and growing reputation in the country and is not unknown abroad. I congratulate all who are associated in this undertaking for the good work which it is doing in the education of its students to lead lives of honor and usefulness, thus exalting the race for which it was established. Nowhere, I think, could a more delightful location have been chosen than this unique educational experiment, which has attracted the attention and won the support of even conservative philanthropists in all sections of the country. To speak of Tuskegee without paying special tribute to Booker T. Washington's genius and perseverance would be impossible. The inception of this noble enterprise was his, and he deserves high credit for it. He was His was the enthusiasm and enterprise which made its steady progress possible and established the institution in its present high standard of accomplishment. He has won a worthy reputation as one of the great leaders of his race, widely known and much respected at home and abroad as an accomplished educator, a great orator, and a true philanthropist. The Honorable John D. Long, Secretary of the Navy, said in part, I cannot make a speech today. My heart is too full of hope, admiration, and pride for my countrymen, both of both sections and both colors. I am filled with gratitude and admiration for your work, and from this time forward, I shall have absolute confidence in your progress and in the solution of the problem in which you are engaged. The problem, I say, has been solved. A picture has been presented today which should be put upon canvas with the pictures of Washington and Lincoln and transmitted to future time and generations. A picture which the press of the country should spread broadcast over the land. A most dramatic picture, and the picture is this: the President of the United States standing on this platform, on one side, the Governor of Alabama, on the other, completing the Trinity, a representative of a race only a few years ago in bondage, the colored president of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. God bless the president under whose majesty such a scene as this is presented to the American people. God bless the state of Alabama, which is showing that it can deal with the problem for itself. God bless the orator, philanthropist, and disciple of the great master, who, if he were on earth, would be doing the same work, Booker T. Washington. The Postmaster General Smith closed the address which he made with these words: We have witnessed many spectacles within the last few days. We have seen the magnificent grandeur and the magnificent achievements of one of the greatest metropolitan cities in the South. We have seen heroes of the war pass by in this procession. We have seen floral parades, but I am sure my colleagues will agree with me in saying that we have witnessed no spectacle more impressive and more encouraging, more inspiring for our future than that which we have witnessed here this morning. Some days after the president returned to Washington, I received the letter which follows: Executive Mansion, Washington, D.C., December 23rd, 1899. Dear Sir, by this mail, I take pleasure in sending you engrossing copies of the souvenir of the visit of the President to your institution. These sheets bear the autographs of the President and the members of the Cabinet who accompanied him on the trip. Let me take this opportunity of congratulating you most heartily and sincerely upon the great success of the exercises provided for and entertainment furnished us under your auspices during our visit to Tuskegee. Every feature of the program was perfectly executed and was viewed or participated in with the heartiest satisfaction by every visitor present. The unique exhibition which you gave of your pupils engaged in their industrial vocations was not only artistic but thoroughly impressive. The tribute paid by the President and his cabinet to your work was none too high and forms a most encouraging augury, I think, for the future prosperity of your institution. I cannot close without assuring you that the modesty shown by yourself in the exercises was most favorably commented upon by all the members of our party. With best wishes for the continued advance of your most useful and patriotic undertaking, kind personal regards, and the compliments of the season, believe me always, very sincerely yours, John Addison Porter, Secretary to President Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, Tuskegee, Alabama. 20 years have now passed since I made the first humble effort at Tuskegee in a broken down shanty and an old hen house without owning a dollar's worth of property and with but one teacher and 30 students. At the present time, the institution owns 2,300 acres of land, 1,000 of which are under cultivation each year entirely by student labor. There are now upon the grounds, counting large and small, 66 buildings, and all except 4 of these have been almost wholly erected by the labor of our students. While the students are at work upon the land and in erecting the buildings, they are taught by competent instructors the latest methods of agriculture and the trades connected with the building. There are in constant operation at the school in connection with thorough academic and religious training, 30 industrial departments. All of these teach industries at which our men and women can find immediate employment as soon as they leave the institution. The only difficulty now is that the demand for our graduates from both white and Black people in the South is so great that we cannot supply more than one half the persons for whom applications come to us. Neither have we the buildings nor the money for current expenses to enable us to admit to the school more than one half the young men and women who apply to us for admission. In our industrial teachings, we keep 3 things in mind. First, that the student shall be so educated that he shall be enabled to meet conditions as they exist now in the part of the South where he lives. In a word, to be able to do the thing which the world wants done. Second, that every student who graduates from the school shall have enough skill coupled with intelligence and moral character to enable him in making a living for himself and others. Third, to send every graduate out feeling and knowing that labor is dignified and beautiful, to make each one love labor instead of trying to escape it. In addition to the agricultural training which we give our young men and the training given to our girls in all the usual domestic employments, we now train a number of girls in agriculture each year. These girls are taught gardening, fruit growing, dairying, bee culturing, and poultry raising. While the institution is in no sense denominational, we have a department known as the Phelps Hall Bible Training School, in which a number of students are prepared for the ministry and other forms of Christian work. especially work in the country districts. What is equally important, each one of these students works half of each day at some, give me one moment, I'm having some technical difficulties. I'm sorry about that. Each one of these students work half a day at some industry in order to get skill and to love work, so that when he goes out from the institution, he is prepared to set the people with whom he goes to labor a proper example in the matter of industry. The value of our property is now over $700,000. If we add to this our endowment fund, which at present is $1 million, the total value of the property is now $1.7 million. Aside from the need for more buildings and for more money for current expenses, the endowment fund should be increased to at least $3 million. The annual current expenses are now about $150,000. The greater part of this I collect each year by going from door to door and from house to house. All of our property is free from mortgage and is deeded to the undenominational Board of Trustees who have control of the institution. From 30 students, the number has grown to 1,400, coming from 27 states and territories from Africa, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and other foreign countries. In our departments, there are 110 officers and instructors. If we add the families of our instructors, we have a constant population upon our grounds of not far from 1,700 people. I have often been asked how we keep so large a body of people together and at the same time keep them out of mischief. There are two answers: that the men and women who come to us for education are in earnest, and that everybody is kept busy. The following outline is of our daily work will testify to this. 5 a.m. rising bell. 5:50 a.m. warning breakfast bell. 6 a.m. breakfast bell. 6:20 a.m. breakfast is over. 6:20 to 6:50 a.m. rooms are clean. 6:50 work bell. 7:30 morning study hour. 8:20 morning school bell. 8:25 inspection of young men's toilet and ranks. 8:40 devotional exercises in chapel. 8:55 5 minutes with the daily news. 9 a.m. classwork begins. 12 noon classwork closes. 12:15 p.m. dinner. 1 p.m. bell work. 1:30 p.m. classwork begins. 3:30 p.m. classwork ends. 5:30 p.m. bells to knock off work. 6 p.m. supper. 7:10 p.m. evening prayers. 7:30 p.m. evening study hour. 8:45 p.m. evening study hour closes. 9:20 p.m. warning retiring bell. 9:30 p.m. retiring bell. So he ran a tight ship and kept a tight schedule. We try to keep constantly in mind the fact that the worth of the school is to be judged by its graduates. Counting those who have finished the full course, together with those who have taken enough training to enable them to do reasonably good work, we can safely say that at least 6,000 men and women from Tuskegee are now at work in different parts of the South. Men and women who, by their own example or by direct effort, are showing the masses of our race how to improve their material education and moral and religious life. What is equally important, they are exhibiting a degree of common sense and self control which is causing better relations to exist between the races and is causing the Southern white man to learn to believe in the value of educating the men and women of my race. Aside from this, there is the influence that is constantly being exerted through the mothers' meeting and the plantation work conducted by Miss Washington. Wherever our graduates go, the changes which soon begin to appear in the buying of land, improving homes, saving money, in education, and in high moral character are remarkable. Whole communities are fast being revolutionized through the instrumentality of these men and women. 10 years ago, I organized at Tuskegee the first Negro Conference. This is an annual gathering which now brings to the school 800 or 900 representative men and women of the race who come to spend a day in finding out what the actual industrial, mental, and moral conditions of the people are, and informing plans for improvement. Out from this central Negro conference at Tuskegee have grown numerous state and local conferences which are doing the same kind of work. As a result of the influence of these gatherings, one delegate reported at the last annual meeting that 10 families in his community have brought and paid for homes. On the day following the annual Negro Conference, there is held the Workers' Conference. This is composed of officers and teachers who are engaged in educational work in the larger institutions in the South. The Negro Conference furnishes a rare opportunity for these workers to study the real condition of the rank and file of the people. In the summer of 1900, with the assistance of such prominent colored men as Mr. T. Thomas Fortune, who has always helped my hands in every effort, I organized the National Negro Business League, which held its first meeting in Boston and brought together for the first time a large number of the colored men who are engaged in various lines of trade or business in different parts of the United States. 30 states were represented at our first meeting. Out of this national meeting grew state and local business leagues. In addition to looking after the executive side of the work at Tuskegee, the raising and greater part of the money for the support of the school, I cannot seem to escape the duty of answering at least a part of the calls which come to me unsought to address Southern white audiences and audiences of my own race, as well as frequent gatherings in the North. As to how much of my time is spent in this way, the following clipping from a Buffalo, New York paper will tell. This has reference to an occasion when I spoke before the National Education Association in that city. Booker T. Washington, the foremost educator among the colored people of the world, was a very busy man from the time he arrived in the city the other night from the West and registered at the Iroquois. He had hardly removed the stains of travel when it was time to partake of supper. Then he had a public levee in the parlors of the Iroquois until 8 o'clock. During that time, he was greeted by over 200 eminent teachers and educators from all parts of the United States. Shortly after 8 o'clock, he was driven in a carriage to Music Hall, and in 1 hour and a half, he made 2 ringing addresses as to as many as 5,000 people on Negro education. Then Mr. Washington was taken in the charge by a delegation of colored citizens headed by Reverend Mr. Watkins and hustled off to a small informal reception arranged in honor of his visit by the people of his race. Nor can I, in addition to making these addresses, escape the duty of calling the attention of the South and of the country in general through the medium of the press to matters that pertain to the interests of both races. This, for example, I have done in regard to the evil habit of lynching. When the Louisiana State Constitutional Convention was in session, I wrote an open letter to that body pleading for justice for the race. In all such efforts, I have received warm and hearty papers, as well as from those in other parts of the country. Despite superficial and temporary signs which might lead one to entertain a contrary position, there was never a time when I felt more hopeful for the race than I do at the present. The great human law that in the end recognizes and rewards merit is everlasting and universal. The outside world does not know, neither can it appreciate the struggle that is constantly going on both the Southern white people and their former slaves to free themselves from racial prejudice. And while both races are thus struggling, they should have sympathy and support in the forbearance of the rest of the world. As I write the closing words of this autobiography, I find myself, not by design, in the city of Richmond, Virginia, the city which only a few decades ago was the capital of the Southern Confederacy, and where, about 25 years ago, because of my poverty, I slept night after night under the sidewalk. This time I am in Richmond as a guest of the colored people of the city and came at their request to deliver an address last night to both races in the Academy of Music, the largest and finest audience room in the city. This has been this was the first time that the colored people had ever been permitted to use this hall. The day before I came, the city council passed a vote to attend the meeting in a body to hear me speak. The state legislature, including the House of Delegates and the Senate, also passed a unanimous vote to attend in a body. In the presence of hundreds of colored people, many distinguished white citizens, the council, the state legislature, and state officials, I delivered my message, which was one of hope and cheer. And from the bottom of my heart, I thanked both races for this welcome back to the state that gave me birth. The end. Greetings, Forecast. How are you tonight? Thanks for tuning in. You said, oh, damn, he was here when he finished writing the book. That's what's up. Yep, he was there in Richmond. So, as you can see, Booker T. Washington was a complicated man, but at the end of the day, he was a former enslaved person who basically, with the help of government programs, bootstrapped himself up. He wound up having to placate to a lot of white people, and he kind of put them in a place of great reverence. He felt that they were on his side, but every white person that was on his side always told him not to forget the poor white man. And I kind of sort of resent that reality because white people have been taking care of their white people for the longest times. And the poor white man at the South was someone who used to be a slaveholder who probably lost his wealth by gambling and because of the war. So I don't have as much sympathy or empathy for the poor white man at the South as I do the poor black man in the South. So that's something to think about. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments. I thank you all for tuning in tonight. I thank Sister Raw and the elders listening with her, Bwana Haguziki. I thank the forecast. I thank Afro Native World. Thank you, Brother Bakari. Thank you, Oni. Thank you, Koku. I know that the children from the Daycare Ladies Network are listening. I know that the children from Jesse's Kids are listening. And I thank you, even you, listening in the future. KW Don 7, I appreciate you. All right, guys. It was the poor whites that committed the most violence. Absolutely, it was the poor whites that committed the most violence. I think that we have to get past trying to forgive them and get to the point of never forgetting what they did and who they were. We don't have a duty and a responsibility to the poor whites. We have a duty and responsibility to the mass of Black people. Uh, I think that we need to get to the point where we are upholding and have a race consciousness so that we are upholding our race and we're not just sitting here trying to love everybody. No people of color coalitions here. Greetings, Forecast. How are you tonight?
Hey Mitch, how you doing?
I'm all right.
Hey, yeah, I know you about to get off. I'm not gonna be long.
You fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because I know that sometimes I might say stuff that seems like disrespectful to Booker T. Washington and stuff like that, and I don't try to be disrespectful. But you know, it's like you said, like that man was born into slavery. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to be like, oh well, he was disrespectful. I just disagree with some stuff. And you know, even back then, it's like you said, like a lot of the stuff that he was saying was to cater to a certain audience in some respects, you know. But like even then, like they all had this do for self thing, even though they had different methods. But they challenged them back then when they used to say, don't challenge them when they try to come commit violence to you, and other people challenge that, you know. So I ain't wanted to be like misconstrued, like to be like disrespectful to Booker T. Washington, because even in this book is a whole lot of great information, and I'm glad you read it because there's a lot of great information. But like I said, that's the difference. That man was born into slavery, so it's not to be like throw him away or something like that, you know. But some of the ideology we still have even to this day when we talk about the poor people and all of this other stuff, even though he was about making businesses and you know. But you know, that's all I wanted to say. I don't, because I was like, yeah, it seems like I disrespect him, and I try not to, you know.
I don't think that you disrespect him, and I don't think anyone is beyond the critiques that we have of them. Because we have more information, we can critique him in a way that is, looking at him from the comfort of the 21st century conveniences that we have, where if we started our own businesses, we could put ourselves in a position where we didn't have to deal with white people on a consistent basis. But he basically had to go to white people to ask them for the funds to get his school off the ground because we didn't have a capital base of our own. So I don't think that you disrespect him. I think that no one is beyond a critique. And we have to get to the point where we can critique and accept these critiques in stride, because Booker T. Washington had his flaws. I think he praised white people too much. I think that he was too forgiving too soon. I think that he taught some things that, you know, could have, you know, waited a generation to be taught, because he's talking about how attractive this man or this woman was. And I'm like, why are you talking about the attractiveness of these white people when you got a whole almost white wife, two of them, that you can love on and care for, and you have all these other black people that are in your midst, And then he eventually got to the point where he was exposed to the upper crust and upper classes of white people, black people. But I think that those people had gotten their money because some of them were interracial and had had different types of opportunities to get access to capital. So, I think that no one is above a critique. I'll just say that. No one is above a critique, and there's nothing wrong with criticizing him for the faults that he had. Because he says in his book that he wrote about the lynchings, but he was not as outspoken as he could have been about the lynchings because he didn't want to seem to be too critical of the South because he lived in the South and he had to live amongst those people, you know?
Yeah, I agree with what you said 100%. He did definitely, and he did great things with the resources too. So I want to throw that in. So he did great things but yeah, it was a little bit too forgiving at some points and a bit too wanting to fit into the society. So yeah, I agree with everything you said. But yeah,
Well, thank
what's your next book gonna be?
I was debating over whether or not I was going to do the Negro Pilgrimage or the Negro. Um, it was another Booker T. Washington book, The Negro in North America, The Future of the Negro in America, where
Okay.
he thought we would have been at this point in time.
Oh yeah, both of them sound interesting. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I appreciate you reading. That was another great reading, another great book. So I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you for listening and all your support. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah, no, thank you, matron. So peace. I appreciate it. So thank you. I'll talk to you later.
All right, I'll talk to you later. All right, I want to thank each and every one of you who tuned in tonight. And I want to say peace, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you Tuesday. Monday, I won't be here because I have to pick my aunt up from the airport. So I'll see you Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, guys. Peace.